Hello, today I'm going to be discussing the pathophysiology of nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome has four main symptoms or signs: heavy range proteinuria, we have also hypoalbuminia, so low albumin in blood, and generalized edema, and hyperlipidemia. I'm going to go through each symptom or each sign. I'm going to explain the pathophysiology of them for each one. So, starting with this is the blood side, and this is the urine side. And this is the basement membrane, obviously. And we also have the podocytes, also known as epithelial cells. And here we have the endothelial cells. The endothelial cell's main job is to filter out the protein. It prevents protein, such as heavy molecular weight proteins and low molecular weight proteins, from crossing from the side of the blood into the side of the urine. Now, how does it stop the heavy molecular weight proteins? Well, it's simple. The size is just simply too small for the heavy molecular weight proteins to pass. But what about the low molecular weight proteins, such as albumin? Well, they're tiny enough to pass through the gaps, so how does the kidney stop it? How does it filter it? Well, the endothelial cells have protein called nephrin and podosin. These proteins, they cause a negative sign on the endothelial cells. It causes a negative charge, on the endothelial cells. And something really interesting too, that albumin or low molecular weight proteins in general have a negative sign, negative charge on them as well. So they both have negative charges, so negative plus negative, they repel one another, and that stops the low molecular weight proteins from crossing to the urine side and remain in the blood. So how does the hypoalbuminia and the heavy range proteinuria occur? Well, it's simple, really. We have a disease called minimal change nephrotic syndrome, which is going to be in about 85% of the cases you see of nephrotic syndrome. Minimal change nephrotic syndrome. Let me just erase this right here. Minimal change nephrotic syndrome, what it does basically is it's essentially an autoimmune disease. And this autoimmune disease causes T cell dysfunction, which then causes abnormal cytokine release. Cytokines. And these abnormal cytokines, they actually damage nephrin and podosin. And if you remembered, nephrin and podosin are the ones that have the negative charge, that cause the endothelial cells to have negative charge. Well, then what's going to stop the low molecular weight proteins from not passing through if there's no negative charge? Well, if there's no negative charge, there's loss of the repelling forces, and that causes the albumin to pass. So this is the albuminia. The hypoalbuminia. They escape from the blood. The albumin escapes from the blood because the loss of the negative charge here. No more negative charge, so it passes from the blood to the urine, and that causes also heavy proteinuria. So that's two of the signs explained pathophysiology. I explained their pathophysiology. Now, one more thing to note: minimal change nephrotic syndrome, which I said is about 85% of the cases. How can you tell it's minimal change nephrotic syndrome? Well, simply, it has something called selective proteinuria. Meaning, well, you see how the heavy molecular weight proteins cannot pass due to the size, purely due to the size, so they're not really affected by the loss of negative charge here. So the heavy molecular weight proteins are not present in the urine, not present in urine. But the low molecular weight proteins that are affected by the negative charge, they are present in the urine. So this is what selective proteinuria means. Loss of low molecular weight proteins, while the high molecular weight proteins are normal high molecular weight proteins. So that's basically minimal change nephrotic syndrome. It's a side note, but it's important to know. Now, we did the heavy proteinuria, we did the hypoalbuminia. Now we have two more. Yes, the generalized edema. Well, the generalized edema, imagine, like, this is quite simple. This is the blood vessel. If all this albumin is escaping, and if you remember correctly, protein is what's needed for something called the ontonic pressure. The ontonic pressure is the pressure of from outside the blood vessel into the blood vessel. So if this pressure is lost due to the loss of albumin, well, now what? Simply the fluid is just gonna accumulate outside the blood vessel. Fluid is gonna accumulate outside because there's no more ontonic pulling force, and that's gonna cause generalized edema, usually in lower limb. So that's the third part. So we did the generalized edema, the hypoalbuminia in the blood, and the heavy proteinuria. They're all related. There's one that seems slightly unrelated, and it's concerning the liver. This is the liver right here. And what happens when there's a decrease? Well, obviously, when the albumin escapes, there's going to be hypoalbuminia. The liver detects this and tries to increase the albumin. But wait a minute, the albumin cannot remain in the blood due to the loss of the negative charge on the endothelial cells. So actually, it's going to cause more albumin in urine. So what the liver does instead is actually really interesting. It increases another protein, and it's called lipoprotein. So lipoprotein is going to increase, and lipoprotein is actually a heavy molecular weight protein. So lipoprotein is a heavy molecular weight protein, meaning it cannot physically pass through the endothelial cells like other heavy molecular weight proteins. But here's the catch. There's an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which, if you haven't guessed, it breaks down the lipoprotein. So lipoprotein lipase breaks down lipoprotein. But unfortunately, lipoprotein lipase is low molecular weight. It's a low molecular weight protein, meaning it does pass through, because there's a loss of, like, this is negative, but there's a loss of negative charge here, like we said. So it passes through to the urine, meaning if it passes through, it cannot break down the lipoprotein. So lipoprotein is gonna actually increase even more. So increase in lipoprotein even more, and this causes the final symptom, which is hyperlipidemia. And that's all. That's the pathophysiology of nephrotic syndrome explained.